It would be hard to imagine some movies or TV shows without their music. They're virtually inseparable. In most cases, though, the music is subservient to the action on screen. It's just a narrative device that can add emotion or depth. But what happens when the music is elevated above the background? What if the music is promoted to almost the status of a character on the show? That's exactly what composer David Schwartz did with Arrested Development. In most films or TV shows, you would notice that the music wasn't there, but it only subtly adds to the story. It's still a background layer. In Arrested Development, though, many of the jokes wouldn't even exist without the music. It's moved forward out of the background. The music is so crucial to the show, it might as well be sitting right next to Ron Howard as a second narrator. So today, let's dig in and figure out how it's done. In order to study this, I did what any logical person would do, and I watched the first 3 seasons, and I wrote down every single musical cue from all 53 episodes. Why just the first 3? Well, fans are very split over seasons 4 and 5, and I fall somewhere in the middle, but in short, the feel of the last 2 seasons are very different from the first 3, and besides, I don't have Netflix, but I do have seasons 1 through 3 on DVD. In all, I counted 1,371 cues, which comes out to an average of about 26 per episode, and I'm quite confident that I missed a lot of them. The music is playing almost constantly. Pretty much every single episode is saturated with an acoustic swing riff. But of those 1,371 cues, I found that 93 cues repeated in some significant way throughout the first 3 seasons. But let's step back. If we're going to consider that music is as important to the show as any of the characters, let's take a moment to look at the writing and see how the non-musical jokes are written. The jokes take a lot of different forms in this show. Again, let's consider this a non-exhaustive list. Running jokes. Perhaps what the show is most known for is its long catalog of running jokes. A character will establish the joke, typically a seemingly inconspicuous action or phrase, such as a back rub or maybe a chicken dance. After that, a pattern will be established either by the same character or by different characters. Then finally, the pattern is subverted, which gives us the punchline. This is sometimes full seasons later. Catchphrases. Just about every character has one, and just about every catchphrase gets passed around to different members of the Bluth family.
Her?
Huh?
Her? Her?
I've made a huge mistake.
I've made a huge mistake.
Made a huge mistake.
I've made a huge mistake.
I've made a huge mistake.
Foreshadowing. This is why it takes watching the show like 7 times fully through before you finally catch everything. They were preparing for 6 months before Buster lost his hand, or before we found out who Rita really is. Parody and satire. Pretty much anything and everything is parodied on this show. Examples range from the Bluth's racism to the Patriot Act. Wordplay. The wordplay is almost constant. Pretty much every name on the show gets a pun at some point, but especially Anne.
It's as Anne as it knows on Plain's face.
There's a wordplay on Lucille's name between a loose seal in a play and a loose seal in the ocean.
Lucille! Watch out for Lucille!
Self-reference. We could do a full dissertation on the self-references in the show. I mean, there is just so much meta-humor. There are jokes that have meaning in-universe, but also reference the show, leaning on or even breaking the fourth wall.
I don't think the Home Builders Organization is going to be supporting us.
Yeah, the HBO's not going to want us. What do we do now?
Well, I think it's showtime.
There are direct references to the show itself.
Arrested Development.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
Or sometimes to the actors within the show. Juxtaposition. A common way that this occurs is a character says one thing which is immediately disproven.
You can say what you want about the Milford Academy, the kids who came out of there prepared for life.
Does anyone know how to eat one of these?
Other than that, the tone of the show is just generally not consistent with the plot line. It's an upbeat show, but it's at one point casually mentioned that George once poisoned someone.
I said to the teacher, I said, you poison her, I'll poison you.
George Sr. did more than just say it. He sent the man a basket of poison muffins.
Do you know the Muffin Man? There's a reward in it if you do.
Misunderstandings. Again, it's almost constantly. Now, music as a character in Arrested Development. Of course, there are plenty of examples in the show of when music does exactly what we would expect it to. like the incidental swing music that underscores every episode. Music often does draw thematic connections, such as each of Michael's serious relationships have their own cue. Or how Rose's turn is sung by both Lucille and Buster when they're left alone in the penthouse.
And that's when Lucille realized that she just might like being alone after all. It was the first taste of alcohol Buster had since he was nursing.
Of course, the closest that anything comes to a leitmotif is Job in the final countdown. But today, we're here to see how the music is different. Like I said in the open, music is essentially a second narrator. It will often use the comedy rule of 3, much in the same way of the dialogue and actions of the other characters. And there are plenty of examples of this. In the Season 2 episode Good Grief, George Michael has just been broken up with when Christmas Time Is Here from the Charlie Brown Christmas special plays as he sullenly walks home, much like Charlie Brown would.
George Michael, meanwhile, had just been broken up with by his first girlfriend and was on his way home.
For bonus points, there's even a beagle lying on top of a red doghouse in the background. Second, George, who is a fugitive in the family attic, learns that his wife is back with his twin brother Oscar. This makes him sad, and once again, we hear Christmas Time Is Here. But for the third iteration, it's subverted with this hilarious exchange from Tobias.
Hey, where the are my hard-boiled eggs?
Another great example is the tender music that plays when Michael and George Michael have a moment. This happens at the end of a lot of episodes, almost like it's making fun of those 90s sitcoms that had similar music playing during cheesy, tender moments.
Is that a lie?
I shouldn't have poked my nose into your life.
My life?
I know that you're growing up.
Yeah, but Dad, you're like the most important part of my life.
Anyway, this music has only ever been used for nice moments between Michael and George Michael until the episode Shock and Awe. George Michael has a crush on his ethics teacher, and he confides in Lindsay about it. Lindsay believes that George Michael wants a mother, and approaches the conversation in that way.
There's nothing wrong with that. Although, I must say I'm a little hurt that you haven't considered me.
This, again, is a subversion of our expectations with this cue, as Lindsay is unknowingly very wrong.
Lindsay had never been more proud of anything she had said in her entire life.
Yikes.
From the same episode, we hear a cue when we first learn that George Michael has a crush on his teacher.
In fact, George Michael had developed a hopeless crush on his ethics teacher, a woman named Beth Bailey.
Law, even minor crimes are punishable by brutally chopping off the offender's hand.
No ring?
Then, when the misinformed Lindsay tells Michael to go after George Michael's teacher, we hear the cue again.
I'm Miss Bailey, the ethics teacher. My goal is to teach your children about the preciousness of life that can be lost by the mindless pulling of a trigger.
However, throughout this entire episode, Job has been attempting to get back at Michael by sleeping with anyone that Michael is interested in.
You know what? Now it's time for me to do the right thing. I slept with the ethics teacher. I'm sorry.
However, he gets the wrong teacher. And, well, the cue is subverted.
In fact, Job mistook the civics teacher for the ethics teacher Michael was dating.
Man, he has a type.
In Season 2, we have a cue entitled I'm Blue Man, which is used, one, when Tobias is sad.
Tobias was also having a bad day. Lindsay had met someone and he hadn't. And that's when he found what he thought was a support group for depressed men.
2, when Tobias is literally a blue man.
And knowing that his father had a penchant for hiding valuable things in walls, considered one last desperate gambit.
This is crazy. What am I doing? Using a hammer to try to...
Are you crazy?
And 3, when it's subverted, as Lindsay is now the one that's sad, and it's double subverted as Tobias is now in silver.
Tobias.
Lindsay.
The cue titled "Not Your Father" plays every time that Oscar hints at being Buster's real father.
They said my father was here.
Did they?
You're the one who says I need a father figure.
Yes. A father figure.
Fine.
Yeah, I've thought about it. I guess I look like you.
More than you'll ever know.
Do you know what I went through to have this boy?
Oh, I know where the boy came from. I think she misses my brother.
My father?
Yes? I mean, yes.
Joe made me kiss Franklin, and I think my father was here.
Maybe he still is. Well, shut up.
However, it's subverted again because Buster finally realized when Oscar was actually talking about popcorn.
I'm so forgetful. I hope you don't get that from me.
Get that from you. Do you feel okay?
Just forget it! I wanted to share my pop secret with you! Oh, but forget it!
Pop secret? Is Oscar my real father? You said my father was my father, but my uncle is my father. My father is my uncle!
There are plenty of other examples, but we'll look at just one more. There is a ukulele cadence, which is typically used for commercial breaks.
Indeed, the land was valueless.
Fellas! Fellas! So, tell me about this investment you made.
Which is then subverted in this moment from Tobias.
You see, Buster, it wasn't the seal that you couldn't stand up to. It was Lucille. Oh, I'm getting chills. If this was a Lifetime Moment of Truth movie, this would be our act break.
But it wasn't.
Only to be reconstructed a few minutes later.
Stop her, Buster!
Well, what am I supposed to do?
Stop her!
Stop yelling at me!
I'm leaving!
And that's when Buster noticed the seal on Rita's backpack.
Hey, talk about cathartic. Now that's an act break.
Music reveals the true nature of the scene. Being an omniscient narrator, Ron Howard will often interject if a character is lying.
Well, the Blue Man Group might need me, and I do deserve a fancy phone.
They didn't. And he doesn't.
Music often exhibits a similar omniscience. For example, George once tries to convince Michael that prison is hell, but a montage of him enjoying it plays with the music What Could Be Better.
Yeah, well, you could save me a lot of stress if you just turned yourself in.
No, never. I can't go back to the joint. No, I can't not go back there.
What could be better?
Stop it.
Hey, man. The whole gang's together.
Get up there!
However, it can also provide some more disturbing revelations. Throughout the series, George Michael has a crush on his cousin, Maybe, which is accompanied by this cue.
Like his father, George Michael had been nursing an impossible crush. It was on his cousin, Maybe. And with no one to talk to, he was looking for some kind of direction.
Just give me a sign. First one's obvious. Okay.
He continued to look for a sign until finally...
Maybe tonight.
The same cue eventually plays over a shot of Buster and his mother Lucille, which has some pretty disturbing, albeit probably true implications.
You certainly tried. You guys wore matching outfits till he was 12.
Even once on a magazine cover that had been mocked within the family for years.
We could get a giant checkbook, too. We're just not that starved for attention.
Additionally, the theme that plays for Maybe as a Hollywood executive.
After lying about her age, she had conned her way into a job as a movie studio executive.
Did you get the stack of scripts that I sent you? Because you certainly look well rested.
Marry me.
Is used for Tobias's ridiculous new headshots.
Okay, well, perhaps I jumped the gun on those new headshots.
Which could just be mocking Tobias as a terrible actor, but it's also shown that Maybe consistently fails at her job.
Well, Tobias, maybe you should spend less time focused on your looks and a little bit more time focused on your daughter, okay? Her grades are terrible. She's gonna start getting Fs.
Actually, she'd already gotten one, as the movie she'd released in her secret life as a studio executive was losing money.
This cue shows that neither of them really belong in Hollywood. And much like a catchphrase which is said by multiple characters, this musical connection shows that no matter how much Maybe wants to distance herself from her father, these characters aren't really all that different from one another. Music becomes a part of the shorthand for jokes. Over the course of time, jokes that have been established have been whittled down to a shorthand version of that joke. This allows for way more jokes to be crammed into a shorter period of time. Take the family's reaction to Anne. This joke eventually gets shortened down to one word.
Her?
There are some great musical examples of this. We just finished looking at the Hollywood theme playing over Tobias's headshots. This works so quickly because the cue has already established a meaning because of Maybe. This is similar to how the final countdown works for Job.
Oh, well then, perchance I might be able to borrow your cellular telephone?
I'm not fit to run a company, and I don't deserve a fancy phone.
Tobias set about learning how to operate his new cell phone. And Steve Holt finally tracks down his real father.
I've been wondering my whole life who he is. A scientist, a doctor, a senator?
Well, I got some bad news.
Wow. Is that what's gonna happen to my hair?
On the next Arrested Development,
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Thanks for watching this episode of 2 Minute Music Theory. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. Also be sure to check out my other channel, Jesse Strickland Music, which is home to all of my compositions. And if you're the kind of person who uses social media, be sure to connect with me over there.